Public. Okay, it looks like we are live on my Facebook page, on YouTube, and I'm sorry about the glitch with the events. Unfortunately, my streaming service doesn't allow me. There's just it's a sticky wicket here, and it doesn't allow me to go live on the event without bringing someone else on. So my apologies for that. But we are here. I will do my best to share this later. And I want to introduce my wonderful guest, Trinidad Ruiz. If you do not know Trinidad, he is a psychedelic educator, performance coach, and facilitator. And he is fervently dedicated to guiding individuals towards mental and emotional well-being through comprehensive and holistic treatment options, empowering his clients to achieve vibrancy in all aspects of their lives. Welcome, Trinidad.
Thank you. Welcome. I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited.
It's really nice, really nice to have you here. And I love the timeliness of this. And the topic is really interesting, obviously, for both of us, but in particular you, because this is your jam. But there's a big movement now around incorporating psychedelics or plant medicine experiences into our lives, and not just as like a sort of a peak experience kind of thing, or maybe if you've done something like that when you were young, but really as a holistic and healing part of our lives, especially something like microdosing, which seems to have a really very fashionable right now in kind of very more liberal circles. So I am curious if you would maybe do like a little bit of an overview of like why this is kind of surging in popularity right now, or why you think it is.
I'm going to share why I think it is. It's just total, but
I'm going to go on mute and kind of do this stuff in the background.
Historically, in my age group, in my era, I'm 48 years old. Grew up in the say no to drugs era. We had a lot of information coming out of the 60s around LSD, DMT, mushrooms, and different psychedelics. And there was a lot of misinformation and fear around these substances, and I'm included. So I spent most of my life not knowing anything about them and just staying away from them because they were drugs. So what's surging now is a really mental health crisis across the board. We have different pharmaceuticals that have proven to be very effective in some ways, and other ways not meeting all the needs of individuals. What's surging now is more education and understanding about the therapeutic potential for these medicines, for these plants and these substances, to really enhance and complement therapeutic and healing modalities. And we're building new trust around them, rather than seeing them as a drug or something to alter our state of mind and cause harm. So people are changing their perception of these medicines with education, also with increased and gentle experiences. And that's why microdosing not only serves to help people with a variety of symptoms or enhancements in their life, but also helps to change the perception that these are beneficial medicines and not just a drug.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that sort of public service announcement, and the developing science around this, the complementary nature or the holistic nature of dealing with depression and anxiety. And I think it's kind of coupled with this idea that we are so over medicated in our lives, and people really feel like there's this there's such a quickness to sort of do pharmaceuticals and certain medication, and they feel kind of like this sort of lifetime thing. Like, will I be on drugs for the rest of my life? Is this something that I have to manage? That feels like a really depressing thought, no pun intended, that this is something to these experiences are something to manage, but maybe it's even better to think like these are something that can be transformed. That's so much more hopeful, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, not everyone might not come out of depression and anxiety, but it's nice if they feel like there might be other options and other avenues that they could try.
Yes. And because each one of us is so different, and the how we approach medicine a lot of times is cookie cutter, right? You go into the grocery store and there's a thing for a headache, a thing for body aches and pains. And what we do know is that not everybody responds to medications the same, and it's very nuanced. And people that have been on pain medications or pharmaceuticals for years with little to no relief. Now, that's not to say that some people have tremendous results and their life has been transformed by SSRIs, SNRIs, pain medications in different formats, interventions, but that's not for everybody. And so we're speaking to not only managing symptoms, which is typically sometimes the medical model. We want to transcend and kind of change behavioral patterns and perceptions on how we relate to ourselves. So if we think about where depression and anxiety come from, it's not only chemical, physiological, it is also spiritual and mental, right? And so there's a lot of things that we have to shift in shifting and making progress to transcending some of our or meeting our goals.
Right.
Just meeting our goals. Yeah.
By the way, I'm not sure if you hear this too, but I hear like a ringing when you're talking. I'm not sure if you're hearing like some feedback in your mic. But if it's something that you might be able to fix, it's not a deal breaker.
I don't hear it, but
then maybe it's my enhanced ears. Not a problem. It's not a deal breaker. It's just like sort of a mild in the background. But you're bringing up some really great points. And I would love to, let's see, there's so many branches of this where we can go, and I'm trying to figure out what's the right branch. So, you're saying something really, really particular, which is this holistic vision of health, right? And nothing is a silver bullet. I know a lot of people who have done plant medicine journeys, like maybe like ayahuasca or something, and they're like, it changed my life. And maybe it really did change their lives, but it doesn't change everyone's lives without maybe other interventions as well. So I think it's important to note that one person's experience, a transcendental experience, may not be your experience, because many things kind of going on. In particular, like you said, it may be a spiritual problem. It may be a lack of community in your life. It may be depression compounded with other things as well. And so it's the way that you work is in sort of therapeutic ways. Is you're a coach, and you often help people kind of transition through different processes. As your recommendation around caretaking is in doing some coaching and therapeutic work before people have peak experiences with plant medicine. Do I have that right?
In part, some people I help prepare to have peak experiences without any experience with psychedelics. Some people come to it slower. There's how we get and to working with plant medicine and working with these different substances is very nuanced. Not everybody's the same. Some people are just like ready to go and they want to have a process. Some people want to start with microdosing. Some people want to start with macrodosing. There's a variety of approaches, and it's really important for practitioners and facilitators to really spend time with clients and with participants to understand what their goals and their needs are, and matching those goals and needs to the medicine work or the protocol that they're going to be using. And that's what a lot of what my work is consulting and helping people dive through all the information and make more comprehensive and supportive decisions and choices about how they're going to work with something and what type of medicine they're going to work with.
So do you have a lot of people that come to you like consulting, like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I think I need. That's going to solve all my problems. How do you navigate them back to maybe something that's more like therapeutic? I'm curious to the kind of people that come to you with consulting and some of their problems and challenges.
Yeah, a lot of people come from wanting to relief from depression or anxiety or some state of suffering or pain, whatever. It's like we just want relief, right? And maybe they saw the movie How to Change Your Mind, or they saw the thing, the other movie about fantastic fungi, and right, they're like, oh, they have all these hopes and dreams about it, and there's work to be done in order to really increasing the efficacy of these plant medicines and how we interact with them, and really letting them be a piece of the puzzle. A lot of clients that I work with have therapists. They come to me for the consulting around plant medicine, and they return, and while they're still working with their therapist, they continue to work with the therapist because my expertise is in the background of dosing, adaptogenics, different types of plant medicine and how they affect the body. So sometimes we get these individuals like, I have hope, I want this, and it does do that, but how it gets you there is going to be very nuanced, and it's not going to be the same process as you read in the book, or even the experience that your friend had. Because
Yeah.
all unique individuals.
Yes, it's so true. I assume like, you know, I might be like some people who have a certain naivete around plant medicine and the kind of experiences you can have. And I did do something before, and I had no experience in plant medicine or any kind of hallucinogenics or anything like that. And the first thing I did was very extreme, but I don't want to say it was sold to me, but the person that that recommended I do this was like, oh my God, it was like a 20-minute full body orgasm. I felt God. And I was like, okay, great. I'd like to feel
Yeah,
God. I'd like a 20-minute orgasm. Where do I write the check?
Yeah.
And oh my goodness gracious, it was not that. It was the inverse of that. It was, my experience was being like, I feel like throttled into space completely alone I don't know how to explain it. Like this intense sense of loneliness and aloneness. And I came out of this experience kind of shell-shocked. One, because my expectation was like, okay, it was oriented towards just sort of pleasure and opening, and it did not meet that need. And the second was I didn't have any integration work afterwards. So I kind of left that experience like kind of like a raw nerve, like walking around, like really having no way of integrating what just happened to me. It was so outside of the bounds of like pulling meaning from it or anything. And it was kind of weeks before I could kind of like, I really felt the sense like, okay, nothing matters. Like, this is pointless. Like, life's pointless. Like, what are we doing here? This is all like a charade. And slowly kind of like maybe my soul slowly re-entered my body again.
Yes.
So, you're saying, two things, which is like, okay, one is you may not have the same experience. So prepare yourself that way, and also prepare yourself afterwards. So maybe you could kind of talk about integration after.
I work with a lot of clients, and also this was born out of my experience. So I was anti-drug, I was a probation officer. I worked with a lot of clients that were I was sending to jail. Well, I wasn't sending them. They were sending themselves to jail, but
Great Differentiation. Yeah.
Right. So I was working with them, and I got really sad to watch them just go through the system and then also suffer from mental health or drug addiction or alcohol addiction. And so I did a process myself, and I had similar experience as you. I heard other people's experiences, did ayahuasca, and it was great and transformative. Um, However, there are a lot of elements that I felt. I was in grad school at the time, working on my master's in mental health counseling. So I had some clarity of like analyzing what is beneficial, which everybody's talking about, and what we can do better, what can be done better in these. And part of that is preparing people for these experiences, really understanding how your subconscious gets amplified, or the state that you're in gets amplified. You have expectations of having a 20-minute orgasm, right? Like, oh, like we're going to have this, right? But it takes preparation in order to cultivate that energy. It doesn't just happen, right? Medicine's going to take you where it takes you. Sometimes we have ability in our preparation to kind of soften and prepare where it takes us and have the experience that we're looking for. However, then on the back end of it, because your experience in any medicine, I usually tell people, is like 20, even 40% of your work. You're going to have a great experience. Sometimes it'll be difficult and challenging, but it'll be transformative. Even your experience was transformative, not in the way that you thought, but it was transformative, give you a new perspective, right? But how we integrate that is so important. Also, if you come out of these experiences with this deep sense of self and euphoria, and that's what I encourage preparation, to feel a sense of wholeness, of love and connectedness, right? How do we embody that and practice that outside of a deep, intense experience? My philosophy to some degree is medicine shows us what's there, these beautiful parts of who we are, and how we're blocking the receptivity and responsiveness to love and compassion and kindness, and taking the things that we hate about ourselves and just extending them a little compassion so we can work through it, and then we can have access to love and joy. But it does take some coaching and some work, or somebody that has experience with navigating that content to make sense, and also help with grounding, so you don't feel like you're floating off into space for 2 to 6 weeks after your ceremony.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. I guess it's almost like the pre and post work is almost like maybe giving birth. Like giving birth is one part of the journey, but the pregnancy of this is like the gestation period is like getting yourself ready for that peak experience, which is giving birth. And then there's actually something after the peak experience. There's the sort of fourth trimester. So you want to make sure like that even though you can't really predict what may happen in this peak experience, you can mentally prepare for this,
Yeah.
and feel like you have some resources. And also, what you're saying. So, what is, just to kind of pivot a little bit, there's a lot of what people are doing right now are maybe traveling and going to a shaman. Now there's sort of different kinds of shamans. They might not be necessarily indigenous. They could be indigenous, and they may serve medicine, something like ayahuasca, or that seems to be very fashionable right now and very on trend right now, is to do ayahuasca. And they don't they might be very skilled at serving medicine, but they may not their skill set may not involve like aftercare, maybe for a day or two, but they aren't necessarily skilled in a therapeutic way in terms of aftercare. And sometimes I feel like a little bit sad for people, because they are often left in the state that I was, which is like, what does this all mean? And maybe it's one way of doing things, is kind of just keep asking yourself questions. What is one way of kind of helping yourself? But it is nice to actually have a therapist or someone that you trust for a whole journey.
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe you can kind of talk to that, which is like, what's a shaman's role? And maybe what would be, if you were looking for maybe a long term, not just sort of having a peak experience and then coming back on a Monday morning and like chapping into work and like getting on, like trying to like integrate so hard, like so fast, so hard, too much,
Yes.
right?
These are great questions when we're getting introduced and we see somebody has a life transformative moment, and we also want that for ourselves. And what we're looking for, and there's a lot more trainings out there, and people are getting skilled in integration and offering that support. That's also another reason why it's growing in popularity and efficacy, because there is that education and support that people are like, I can't just go do a ceremony and that's done and get what I need out of it. That integration part. So the shaman, if you're going to go to Costa Rica and you're going to participate in a ceremony out there, what I encourage anybody who's working with medicine is have a support system when you get back to process, and a coach, a facilitator, a trained integration specialist, somebody, not just your friend. Okay. So I always encourage people, they may have had experiences and navigated them well.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, if you're not trained around really recognizing your own biases, because where you need to go is not where I need to take you.
Mm.
And where I went is not really necessarily where you need to go.
Mm.
Actually, where I went in my journey is not where you need to go.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right,
And holding space for each other's different experiences is a practice, because we really, even as facilitators and practitioners of medicine, we really have hopes and dreams for our clients to have these transformational experiences and have love and connected to self. And what that looks like is not always clean.
Mm-hmm.
Messy. There's work to be done. When you do medicine, it can open up parts of you that have been suppressed for a long time, and navigating those parts of you and extending them love and compassion is a practice. And so there's a lot of content that comes out of these experiences. In most cases, let's just say this is what people have happen on a high number of experiences. You go, you have a beautiful experience. It's great. In about 4 to 6 weeks after your experience, without proper integration and support and structure, it sometimes can just dissolve into a great experience that you had.
Mm-hmm.
And what I tell people is, like, you can have a heroic dose of psilocybin and do this beautiful experience, and you get a real big euphoric experience for some time after that. But you always come back. The whole of you, so all your shit show, because we're addicted to our trauma. So I apologize if I'm not supposed to swear, but
no, you can swear. It's okay.
we're addicted to our shit show sometimes because we've created an identity around it, our trauma, our anxiety, our depression. And so we can get relief from it. Sometimes it's disorienting not to have it. It's like our teddy bear or our blanket, our security blanket, and practicing to live away from that cycle of filtering all our experience or our current lived experience through our trauma is something that we're learning to detach from, so we can connect to love, peace, affinity, joy, and use that energy to actually tackle some of the difficult things that we've encountered in our life. Mm-hmm. Rather than it being, I need to heal this before I can feel happy. Mm-hmm. Right? And that takes some coaching, somebody who's worked with medicine, because you always come back. A lot of times people go into deep ceremonies and we fight and resist because our reality gets dissolved. And this isn't my thing. I want to make sure we're talking about macro and heroic upper level. If you're doing ketamine or any of these higher dose processes, right? We're getting dissolved of the self, right? Dissolution of our reality. And we want that, and we're working with that to kind of get to what are the belief systems that we have created that block us from love, affinity, connection, right? And so we can kind of make some changes. It's also doing work in our neurotransmitters, creating new neural synaptic connections, supporting neural plasticity, And that's where a lot of our beliefs can shift, because we're waking up this whole of our brain and using that to its fullest potential. That's why we use it. People use it. And that's where people are talking about using it in Silicon Valley, in creativity, and really making those connections and seeing beyond the box that we've placed ourselves in, and really stepping into that creative force. And I want to speak to that also on the side of caution, because even when I work with clients and they access that, a lot of times I'm like, you're going to have an experience. One thing we do is we don't start a relationship. We don't end a relationship. We don't end our job. We don't sell all our belongings and move to Costa Rica. We come back and we integrate, because you'll have this euphoric feeling and you feel like you can conquer the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people make really big mistakes in their integration, even on the positive side, because you're in that euphoric energy and the sky's the limit. What you want to do is learn how to ground in that and cultivate that. And that's what's so important about working with any of these medicines, is really getting people that are educated and experienced, not only educated, but also experienced. So the shaman is experienced in what his role is.
Mm-hmm.
We understand if my needs need more clinical experience, then you make your team, or you find somebody that can provide all those components. Yeah. Because there's a lot more resources now than there ever have been before. We know how medical science, how some ayahuasca interacts with SSRI and SNRI, the old paradigm of, you can't do any of these processes if you're on medication, is not as regimented as it used to be.
Yes. And maybe we could talk about that in a moment, but I just want to sort of echo the nature of experience, because I think maybe with a lot, because like you're saying, like people are kind of like self-prescribing like peak experiences. They're going to like Peru and they're like doing ayahuasca. This is like, I'm going to do this because this is what I think is, and no one is. You're the only person kind of signing up for it. It's with really almost like without context, and you're going somewhere else and then you're coming back home. And I think, Dr. Stephen Porges he says something like the first prerequisite for release is and to kind of integrate that release is safety. And I think two of the things that kind of not having a relationship with a shaman, or maybe a shaman who's not trauma informed, don't necessarily bring about safety for you to have like a full experience, right? So if you don't have any relationship with that person outside of that experience, that one singular experience, it may be hard to sort of trust, because like you said, this dissolution of the self is kind of like a big deal. You're looking for someone else to kind of anchor this in for you. You're really surrendering, and you want to make sure that like when I'm surrendering, like that I trust that this person has set me up for success, or to the best of their ability. He trusts that this would be a good thing for me. And then also they're trauma informed. Yes. And, that would be like, these would be like two prerequisites that I would want theoretically before I do some kind of heroic dose of medicine, that I have a relationship with the facilitator and that they're trauma informed.
So when we're talking about the traditional format, ayahuasca, I participated in it and it was beautiful, but we also want to pay attention to some of the points that you're making, that it doesn't work for everybody, or not everybody came out of their ayahuasca or their journey with positive feedback. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, having a relationship with your practitioner is important, so that the practitioner can cultivate or tailor an experience that meets your personal needs. Now, group ceremonies are all the rage. There's 20 or 30 people, but I work with a lot of people that have had experiences in large groups that it wasn't for them, and there wasn't enough screening to go, hey, how do you respond? Are you a highly sensitive person? Are you on the autism spectrum? I'm a little on the autism spectrum. Mm-hmm. So my responsiveness to sensory input is amplified more so than others. So I have trouble staying out of other people's processes when
Mm.
I was in my ceremony. So
Mhm.
7 years ago, that's where I grew my protocols, was really tailoring environmentals. And there's so much science now
Mhm.
around light, sound, tactile stimulation, uh, hertz frequencies, binaural sound waves, and really
Wow.
tailoring the environment and actually controlling those inputs while clients are in ceremony. Right now, people are getting trained to administer medications, these medicines, but they're also not being trained on understanding where what inputs impact clients' experiences and how to use those to uh, increase the efficacy and to I'm trying to find the words, but really kind of match uh, and protect them, the safety concern, right? So I had a
Mhm.
client who's a therapist, and I work with a lot of therapists, and um, even using the word safety, safe is a triggering concept, right? So saying you're safe in a ceremony to somebody who has a really negative relationship or a trauma relationship with the word safe
Mm.
is has to be considered. I've changed all kinds of languages. There was one time I held space for a client who had very specific religious background that needed the whole environment to match their religious background.
Mm.
And we did
Wow.
it, and it was beautiful. I learned so much from them, and it was an honor to hold space for them, because I really feel like medicine wants to meet you where you're at. But
Mm.
being trained in that, and also being able to, what speaks to safety to each individual, is not a cookie cutter process, and that's something to look for. Now,
Mhm.
if anyone listening to this, or they hear it and they're like, I feel safe, I feel pretty calm, and I've done the thing, that then that's for you. Go to
Mhm.
Peru, or go to Boulder, or wherever your shaman is, and drop in. Have your support network always, like, so somebody you can process with afterwards. If it's not going to be the shaman, the practitioner, great. But we really want to get away from cookie cutter processes, and have enough practitioners and educators and people that are skilled to help people really develop a positive relationship with whatever medicine they're going to work with.
Yeah. Yes, that's I think this is the whole point, is not to discount the wisdom of shamanic practitioners, but to sort of say, like, how do you make this safer for a wider net of people that don't even know what they don't know, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah, and I think that there, one of the things you can correct me if I'm wrong. Plant medicines are not meant to be addictive, but but you do hear about people being kind of doing like 10 ayahuasca ceremonies and I don't know, like a year, 12, or like what seems like an excessive
Or
amount of plant medicine in a short amount of time. And so it's kind of decoupling these two things, that may not necessarily be addictive in and of itself, but transcendent experiences is kind of a form of escapism, right? And that can kind of be like the constant searching for these peak experiences and not really learning how to live in your day to day life. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts around that, because I do see that as like a common thing that happens with people where they're holding on to these, and it doesn't even have to be plant medicine. It can be just any kind of peak
holding, yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Yeah.
What we're looking at is, we want to get to a place where clinician practitioners are asking the question of, um, what did you get out of your last process, right? What are you expecting to get out of this? What responsibilities are you placing on medicine that are in
Mm.
alignment with what medicine does?
Mm, great.
And what are some things that are out of alignment with what medicine does? Because
Mm.
I do work with clients that have had up to 24 ayahuasca experiences, and these are the questions I ask them. Well, what was your relationship with medicine, with the mother, with father, with source going into this? What were your expectations? Because a lot of times what I've experienced, not all, because sometimes Some of these participants are training. So they're doing multiple
Okay.
experience. In my training with Bufo, I did up to 17 processes. Some were easier than others, but it was like I was required to have a very clear understanding of the whole spectrum arc of the work and what medicine does and doesn't do, right? So educating people on how to work and be with medicine, if we're doing it like 24 times, like, and you feel like you're still in the same space as you were as day one, then let's ask some real deep questions on how you're approaching medicine. What is your relationship with medicine? What are you expecting it to do, right? Because a lot of times we're looking for a quick fix, right?
Mm-hmm.
And medicine does not offer that. It does offer some really beautiful insights, and we can use those insights to kind of change the trajectory of our life path. But we have to be open and willing to work with medicine. What I tell people, you're not, especially the medical model, we're used to people dosing, right? Tell me what dose I'm supposed to take, right? In shamanic ceremonies and medicine ceremonies, it's more nuanced. It's like, here's a range and you have to choose.
Yeah.
Right? This is not something that's being done to you. It's something that you're doing with medicine. So wanting to be in communion and in groups, we want to be together, right? We're healing and growing together. Where are we open to that? Where are we closed? Where are we blocking these patterns? Like, and here's my philosophy with working with any of these substances. If you look at how they work neurochemically, they're boosting endorphins, serotonin, and dopamine, right? So we associate those with love, affinity, joy. And a lot of people describe very difficult experiences in medicine. And the reason, anecdotally, I believe, but what I've seen in my experience and watching people and personal experience is we fight against the message of medicine of telling us that we're whole, that we're lovable, even the shit show side of ourselves, that thing you hate about yourself, you need to extend it love to heal it. And we wrestle with that because we're an achievement-based society. Like, well, I'm only as good as my next achievement. So here's the next thing I'm working on. We're not good at grounding in our wholeness and being enough as is, and then starting to share these beautiful parts of who we are with other people, with our friends. Like, we're all fighting to be seen and heard, and yet we're still hiding in our fortress, saying the world's not safe to share ourselves. And I'm not saying go out there and share everything, but I'm saying, like, we start practicing and taking risks, like, and sharing with people out of an honoring of the self, not so much out of seeking affirmation and validation. And then it comes and shifting our relationship with that. But most of the people that have done 24, they don't get this instruction. They don't get this assistant. Even with microdosing, one of the protocols, everybody's doing microdosing, right? It's like one size fits all. You can go on the internet. I'm like, it's not. I'm like, there's certain species of mushrooms that work better for microdosing for certain goals and symptoms than others, and there's other adaptogenics that go together. I'm glad that there's this baseline protocol that Paul Stamets has shared with the entire world, and all this information that he's given us. And then we take that and enhance it and really create a relationship with these medicines and these and herbalists and naturopaths, and use their information and collectively, like, oh yeah, it's not just a one size fits all. It's also how I'm working with it. A lot of times when I work with clients around microdosing, they get their microdose and they feel calm. And what they describe it as I feel sluggish and tired. And a lot of times they're like, well, did you go take a nap? I'm like, is this like, no, I didn't feel that tired. I'm like, your association with your nervous system coming down is that you're tired. And what we're learning is that we have to shift how we enter into experiences and our lived experiences and our job and our work from a place of calm. We can still do the same productivity, but we don't have to do it from an adrenaline-based, cortisol, heart attack driven type of energy.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
there's a lot
Yeah.
to it. I know I said a lot, but
Well, it's really beautiful. I think that, I don't know what other people experience with medicine, but this remembering of who you are, right? That it's not like, oh, all of a sudden you have superpowers, but like there's this sort of remembering of how beautiful and wonderful
yeah,
you are.
that you were
And
deserving from birth.
yeah, and that maybe nothing actually needs to change externally in your life. It's not like, oh, I need to this and that, I need to get rid of my man, and I need to do this, I need to move here. But it's the awakening of yourself, and the external, and the paradox of life is like we could actually hold the good and the bad, and it doesn't need to derail us so much. It doesn't need to rock our sense of self. Medicine won't change the circumstances that come into our lives, but how we could react to them based on, like what you said, this very from a calm center.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the things I focus on is we want to change. I don't want to change your pain and suffering
Mhm.
so much as I just want to change and soften the amplitude and the duration of the
Mm,
episodes so we can
yeah.
make really awake and conscious choices about how to move through it. When it gets
Window
really
of
intense,
tolerance, right? Like this window of tolerance, like I'm resourced for things, and I know how to like kind of close the loop.
yes, and we can really make positive changes or really intentional choices on how to move through things rather than swinging or pendulating from black and white or extremes, right? And also, these changes aren't out of a place of criticism, guilt, shame, trying to shore up our self worth. It comes from an act of self care and self love.
Mm,
Like, I'm not changing this because I'm a bad person so much. I'm like, I'm a human. I screw up. That's part of the human process. I'm going to screw up. If we can connect to love still, like I'm still lovable, it makes taking responsibility and kind of seeing our impact and our contribution in that more accessible. If it's an indictment against who we are as a whole, we suppress it and then we continue this pattern. We ignore it and we don't make long-standing, sustainable change.
yeah. Mm. So we were talking a lot about this affecting us on an individual level, like doing plant medicine, or maybe even other psychedelics. But it's also interesting how to do this inside of sort of couples, when couples are having challenges,
Oh, it's
right?
great.
We live, like you said, we interact with other people, and like how are you seeing it being used for relationship therapy?
Oh, it's great. Like right now, like MAPS has done a huge service to bringing MDMA into therapeutic interventions, and it's great for couples. The reason why, right, it really floods our system with endorphins and serotonin, and you get what I call the case of the lovies. Like you want to just love everyone, right? And what I've seen in my own personal relationship and also clients is this opportunity to broach very difficult topics from a
Mhm.
more grounded space
Mm.
and being able to see the other person's experience with more empathy and also allowing ourselves to be seen. Because even when were in the throes of an argument and like, you don't hear me, you don't see me, in that moment, we're not receptive, even if our partner does see and hear us.
Mhm.
I was just throwing our whiny, pouty baby tantrums. We're in disconnected communication. And
Mm.
so it's really disruptive. And sometimes our communication patterns, our brains are built for efficiency. They're not built for wellness. They want to
Mm.
find the shortest path to an outcome. And that doesn't mean it's always the best outcome. And it's always doesn't mean it's the healthiest. And so
Mm.
what we see is people getting into communication processes that are very debilitating and undermines the quality of the relationship.
Mm.
It's part of a pattern our nervous response takes over, and we can't see the forest through the trees. And so a lot of these processes help us engage in communication that is softer. I'm like, oh, I had an experience with my girlfriend where we had a very difficult conversation, but we had an MDMA assisted process. And I was like, oh my God, we can talk about this from a calmer space.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of build that practice outside of medicine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we were talking before, we're building these neural synaptic connections that are like, oh, you're getting access to the true you. Like, oh, I didn't have access. Medicine doesn't bring anything that wasn't there before. It's just connecting us and reminding us and bringing us back home to the wholeness of our being. And then like, oh my God, I can have a conversation about any difficult subject. I can still be triggered and keep my head on straight, or I can be triggered and know, like, I know I'm not listening, so let's take a time out.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, so much of our relational, like when we're in conflict, we often kind of really do this like cognitive like dance well, and to sort of like who could like sort of out lawyer each other and like winning the argument, right? Like this idea of winning arguments, like there's no winners of arguments. There's just you're either connecting or disconnecting.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
go ahead. No, keep going. Yeah, I think that's what you're saying. Like MDMA is a connector, and so it's bypassing like the sort of when you want to sort of like lawyer up in your head, you're like, well, no, but I'm feeling so connected to this person. I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to I want to speak from my heart. And what a beautiful training to be able to like just sort of bypass that for a moment and start speaking from the heart.
And it's really much speaking from a sharing space rather than convincing or shaming or arguing, right? Like I need you to believe my experience. And one of the things we understand about the human condition is the way you see something isn't the way that I'm going to see it. We have so many different perspectives. But in order to hold space and kind of get into somebody else's experience is not something that we've been trained or learned. We've been on justification, validation, like, I'm going to tell you why you should agree with me on this. And we're never really seen, because that just, a lot of times that triggers other people's defensiveness. Sure. If we can share, I'm sharing it. And if you see it, great. If you don't, like, maybe I'm hurt, but I can hold the hurt. It's not going to dictate, like, and maybe here's in my own personal communication and what I coach with clients is if somebody's not seeing your perspective, maybe it's not the information you're giving them. Maybe it's the way you're communicating. Maybe it's how you're sharing. Maybe there's a different approach. And I used to have to do that. I'm a double Virgo, so I'm like,
me too, I think.
Yeah, if I wasn't doing this, I'd probably be an attorney. I'm like, I want to argue and like tell you like
did you or did you not say this or that? Like,
I had a really eye-awakening moment when I was with my mom one time when we were kids, and she's like, yeah, Trini, you never do anything wrong. It's always somebody else, isn't it? Isn't it? And I was like, and I didn't really get what she meant because I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
But as a teen and an adult, and I was like, oh, that's how I'm showing up. I'm showing up in that. What am I needing from that? And part of it is I'm avoiding the fact that I'm a human and I screw things up and I need to clean things up sometimes. Okay, a lot of times. But with gentleness and calm, we're remapping that. It's not an indictment against who we are, and it fosters connection. We get to see each other and be each other, and we understand that we're all in this difficult, challenging human experience together. And in order to be vulnerable with one another, we have to start finding safety in our own vulnerability, like opening up and sharing ourselves. I'm going to share this out of honoring my truth and sharing who I am, not out of a attachment to outcome on how somebody will respond.
Beautiful.
There's two parts to that. One, sometimes we already know if they respond negatively. However, what we're not good at is when they hold space for us and love us. That's where people really get triggered and really get resistant, and they get distrustful and like, oh my God, what do you want? Are you trying to? I'm like finally we're getting the thing that we wanted, and we're holding it with suspicion and distrust. That's what I found through this. And like, how do I get my own way? How am I getting in my own way? How am I not receiving from others who want to pour into me and sending their love back to them? That's why I tell people don't read the 5 love languages, because it pathologizes love. It's not a good way to look at it. It's like, if you're going to look at 5 love languages, look at all of them and really challenge yourself on the ones that you're not.
That you don't see. Yeah. Like, don't see how your partner is loving you by doing this or that. And it's I agree with you around that. I think that it narrows in the way that we're seeing love. I mean, certainly I'm kind of mixed on it, but I can see how that could be very reductionistic and kind of flattening this idea of I can only receive love in my love language of choice.
Yeah, it's great to identify that there are love languages. Great. But when we're like, if I only receive love through acts of service, and then we feel really depleted where we're not really like, oh, why doesn't people love me? Because you're only acknowledging acts of service. So I was married for 12, 13 years to a gift giver. And I had such an incredible resentment around gift giving. When she gave me a gift, I felt responsible that I had to reciprocate, and I was in transactional relating, and I had all this noise around it. And it wasn't until after we divorced, and it was 2 years later, and I was doing my work, and actually there was a year that just people kept giving me gifts, and I was annoyed. I was like, what am I supposed to learn here? And I was like, really, what if I started to learn to receive like a gift giver receives? It was the 1 year finally that I had fun going Christmas shopping. It wasn't a chore. It wasn't out of transactional. I was really like, oh, this is what gift givers feel when they're like, oh, this person would like this, and I can't wait to give it to them. All this angst and anxiety. And I called my ex-wife, and I apologized for how I received a lot of her gifts over those years with contempt and resentment. And I apologized. But what I learned from that is how many other ways are we not receiving love that the universe, our friends, our family, our community are trying to love us, but we're so fixated on. And this goes for ceremony. So we look at like, our ceremony is going to be like this. I promise you, ceremony is never going to be what you think it is. No matter how many times you do it, every time you think you have an idea, it may match it a little bit after a time, but medicine takes us where it takes us. And we learn how to surrender. And one of the key points is I tell people, surrender isn't the absence of control. It is the embodiment of control. Have to give consent to surrender. Medicine will never force you, except for one. That's Bufo. Bufo, you go. You go.
Oh my gosh. And I guess in sort of summation and kind of like closing out this talk, it's like having medicine be a way for you to enjoy your everyday life more, for you to find the magic and the transformation in your everyday life. And and even through some more subdued practices like meditation or breath work that can give you access to the divine without being kind of like thrust, like tidal waved into something. I think that really ultimately we want to be able to find wonder in our everyday life and find these moments where I just look, and maybe the other day I was watching the storm and the trees, and I felt, for a second I felt the divine. I felt a memory of the totality and of everything.
Coming back into that curious and playful creator that we were designed to be. That life wasn't supposed to be happening to us, but with us. And coming back, and like I liken it to, medicine brings us back to that childhood curiosity that we lost or gets buried through our adulting, of playfulness, mud pies, feet in the sand. Where I tell people, don't waste 3 days of your 10-day vacation trying to come and be present on your vacation. What if you're able to be present from day one? Jump in the ocean, put your feet in the sand. What if you can find a way to be present with your children? Be present with your family members, especially where I get people with, they have issues with their parents, right? Their parents are your parents, right? We're not going to change them. They are who they are, but we want to be with them. So how can we accept them as they are, as we continually begin to accept who we are and become that thing that we've always needed? Be the affirmer. Not that we don't need others, but we're being the affirmer to ourselves and giving ourselves that that internal shift in our dialogue so that we can be responsive and see all the beauty and see all the love that people are pouring into us.
Yes. And also, like, when we kind of recognize our own darkness too, and our own, when we, I don't know, I guess it's, for lack of a better word, the shadow parts of us, that we actually, that actually is also beautiful and also a part of us, that we allow it in other people too. And we
Shadow
don't
and light
kind
do
of
not exist without one another.
yeah. And there's a certain peace that you allow people to be like assholes and dicks, and you're like, it's just who they are. We don't flatten
Right.
people to this sort of one dimensionality. We really see, like, yeah, they're struggling, or yeah, they did this shitty thing and they're still a good person,
And we
Yeah,
can
they
personalize.
broke my heart, and I had some really actually good memories of
Yeah.
them too.
Yeah.
And really this whole, really seeing the wholeness of everything, which is always complex.
Yeah. And really not personalizing all this information and
Yes.
content,
Yeah.
like they must be a jerk because of me. And blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We're so good at that. It's so debilitating. And then
Mhm.
we lose the essence that we're all in this really difficult experience, this human experience, and we're doing it together. And sometimes it's beautiful, and sometimes it's messy, and sometimes it's chaotic. And being able to see the forest through the trees and accept all the parts of it, that really helps us integrate the shadow and the light, where they're lovers. There's I've never seen a shadow without a light source, or a light source without a shadow.
Yeah.
They go together.
Yeah.
Really honoring that part of us.
Mm.
All the parts of us are welcome.
Yeah. And that is what medicine kind of shows us, like all parts. You're all parts, and they're all welcome, and they're all beautiful,
Yes.
and they just are.
Yes.
I could talk. I love how the path that we've taken in this talk, because I think really, it comes down to this sort of very human. How do we kind of live in this world in our wholeness and accept part of all of us? So,
Yes.
um, so it. I'd love to talk more. This is so nice. It's so nice to talk like
I
this.
can talk for hours.
And I hope everyone else found this really interesting or educational, or maybe piqued your curiosity to learn more. So Trinidad, I'd love for you to talk about how people can contact you, what should they do? Tell them what you've got going on.
Yes. If you want more information, education on microdosing, formulation, or ceremony, or support through integration, you can contact me through Christina, or you can find me on Facebook. Most of my work for the last 7 years has been referral based. I'm just starting to branch out, and I'll have a website soon. I don't have it now, to give more information, because my practice is expanding exponentially. So that is coming soon, but you can contact me through text or email, and I'll give them to Christina so that she has them. I typically don't answer the phone because I'm so busy. So I will respond to text messages. It helps me to put people in order and to schedule consults, and go from there and see what people's individual needs are. Or if you're just curious, have a free 30-minute consultation and talk about more in depth about what I do, and if I meet your needs. And or I also have a very beautiful network of other practitioners that, if I'm not the person for you, I know many others.
That's so wonderful. Yes. Thank you so much for being a wonderful educator, And I really appreciate talking with you about this. You're so certainly passionate about it. This is certainly like your sort of like dharma, your life's work.
Yeah.
So yes,
Thank you.
thank you everyone that was watching today. And if you'd like coaching as well, I offer coaching not in any no plant medicine trainings or anything like that, but more relational ones. So if you are curious to connect with me, please do so as well. You can find more information at ChristinaMcFadden.com. And once again, thank you, Trinidad, for chatting with us. And thank you, everyone that
Yes,
has
thank you
watched
for inviting
today.
me.
And we'll speak soon.
Yes, thank you. Blessings.
Bye.
Bye.